In the early days of December 1894, 16-year-old Samuel Fletcher set his sights on an unusual project, sealing the floor of his small cabin with flat river stones. Each morning, he carried stones from the nearby creek, washing mud and debris from their surfaces before arranging them across the timber foundation. Neighbors paused in their routines to watch, some shaking their heads, others whispering that the idea was foolish. Even the town constable, a practical man named Henry Doyle, raised an eyebrow at the boy's insistence. He leaned on his walking stick outside the fence, observing silently as Samuel knelt, aligning each stone so that the gaps were minimal and the surface flat. Frost had begun to edge the valley, and the winds carried a sharp warning of the winter yet to come. Before we dive deeper into Samuel's careful work, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe if you appreciate patience and foresight. Samuel moved quietly, placing each stone with care, unaware of the growing murmurs around him. He worked at a steady pace, careful not to crack any slabs, and occasionally tapped one into place with a small wooden mallet. His younger sister, Mary, watched from the doorway, hesitant yet curious, occasionally offering him small handfuls of clay to fill the gaps. This was a plan few understood, but the boy persisted, believing it could hold against the cold that others dismissed. As snow began to dust the surrounding fields, the murmurs of doubt only seemed to grow. Yet Samuel remained focused, methodical, and unwavering in his labor. The valley carried an air of quiet tension, with the trees bending under early frost, as if the coming winter itself observed the boy's work. As the villagers returned from their chores, the whispers intensified, carrying across the frost-lined fields and through the narrow paths between cabins. John Carter, a neighbor with 3 children, paused outside his gate, gesturing toward Samuel's small home. "He'll tire before the snow truly sets in," he said quietly to his eldest son, who clutched a bundle of firewood. Nearby, Mrs. Whitman, an elderly widow with thin, lined hands, shook her head and muttered to herself about a boy's foolish fancy. Her gaze lingered on the carefully laid stones as she walked past, her shawl drawn tightly against the biting wind. Even the family's dog, Rust, wandered the perimeter of the yard uncertainly, sniffing at the edges of the stonework and whining softly before circling back to the cabin's door. Despite the derision, Samuel's father, Thomas Fletcher, lent quiet support. He handed stones to his son when requested and offered tools with a steady hand. He spoke no words of encouragement, allowing Samuel's resolve to grow without interference. The boy worked with deliberate precision, crouched over the floorboards, filling gaps with clay, adjusting each stone until it sat flush with its neighbors. He occasionally paused, tapping a mallet gently on a stubborn slab, eyes narrowing in concentration. The early snows had begun to dust the rooftops of the village, settling along the fence lines and across the thatched roofs, hinting at a winter harsher than most could remember. Samuel moved with measured care, aware of the chill seeping through his coat, yet undeterred by both the wind and the murmurs that followed him throughout the day. A quiet rhythm settled over the yard. Stone by stone, tap by tap, the boy continued his work. Children of the village, curious despite warnings, peered from behind fences, witnessing his patience and method. The adults maintained their skepticism, yet no one could deny the careful attention Samuel devoted to the floor, nor the quiet efficiency with which he completed each row. Even as the wind gusted through the valley and dusted the stone with frost, he remained methodical, unwavering in his intent. By the time the sun dipped low behind the hills, The small section of stonework completed by Samuel appeared stable and precise, a silent testament to his labor amidst the chorus of doubt surrounding him. Samuel worked with deliberate care, moving slowly across the cabin floor as he inspected each plank before laying the stones. He scraped away dirt and remnants of old timber, ensuring that each slab would rest evenly without rocking or creating gaps beneath. From the nearby riverbank, he gathered mud and clay, kneading it into a thick paste to fill crevices between the stones, sealing them against cold air and moisture. Each row was measured with precise attention, the edges aligned so that no uneven surfaces would disturb the stability of the floor above. His movements were methodical, almost ritualistic, repeated day after day with steady hands. He would lift a stone, test its fit, tap it gently with a wooden mallet, and then move on to the next. At night, he examined the progress by the dim light of a small lamp, checking for drafts that might slip through the gaps or uneven sections that could compromise the floor's integrity. The wind howled through the valley, rattling the cabin walls and bending the bare trees outside. Yet, Samuel remained focused, unshaken by the chill or the distant laughter of neighbors. Mary, his younger sister, had begun to assist with the lighter stones, learning the patience and care necessary for the work. She would pass stones to her brother, watch his technique, and occasionally fill small gaps with clay under his instruction. The rhythm of labor became a quiet routine: carry, clean, fit, tap, inspect. Even as the frost spread over the valley and early snow dusted the rooftops, Samuel labored on with steady determination. The cabin gradually took shape, stone by stone, each layer a testament to quiet diligence against both nature's cold and the community's skepticism. As Samuel arranges each stone with care, you can like, share, or subscribe to follow the story of quiet diligence. By mid-December, clouds gathered over the mountains with an unusual intensity, rolling in from the north with a low, gray weight that seemed to press upon the valley. The temperature dropped suddenly, freezing the shallow streams that had been flowing only days before. Ice formed in delicate sheets along the edges of rocks, snapping with brittle cracks underfoot, and the trees, stripped of their leaves, glistened with frost that glittered in the weak winter sun. Samuel Fletcher observed these signs silently, noting the rapid change in conditions and the stiffening winds that cut through the valley like a warning. He adjusted his jacket and scarf, moving among the stones he had already laid, checking for small shifts that the frost might cause. Villagers continued their routines, tending to firewood and livestock, assuming the boy's work would soon prove irrelevant. Their voices carried faintly over the frozen fields, remarks about a wasted effort and foolishness, blending with the rattle of shutters and doors against the wind. Yet every gust and each frost-lined morning reinforced Samuel's belief in his strategy. He measured snow accumulation along the cabin edges, inspected the river's thin ice, and noted the crisp, cold scent of the valley air, all silent indicators that the winter would not be mild. A quiet tension settled over the valley, as if nature itself were testing patience and foresight. The wind lifted and tore at loose branches, rattling them against the cabin walls. Samuel worked deliberately, moving one stone at a time, making sure no gap would allow frost to creep beneath the floorboards. Even as snow began to dust the surrounding rooftops and fence lines, he remained methodical, allowing observation and calculation to guide each movement. The valley seemed suspended in stillness, the storm yet to arrive but already foreshadowed in every hardened stream, every bitter wind, and the steady hush that fell across the settlement. At the turn of the month, the work on Samuel Fletcher's cabin floor had reached a steady rhythm, the stones laid in precise rows across the timber foundation. The early frost glimmered along the edges, highlighting the care with which each slab had been set, and the low winter sun cast long shadows across the yard. The valley was quiet. The wind softened for a brief moment, allowing the subtle sounds of labor, wood tapping against stone, clay being pressed into gaps, to stand out. Samuel moved among the stones deliberately, checking for uneven surfaces and ensuring that each section was level and secure. Observers could see the result of patient labor, a small home fortified against the cold, crafted with methodical care rather than haste or spectacle. Mary stood nearby, passing stones as needed and watching her brother's technique with focused attention. Even the dog, Rust, settled beside the doorway, sensing the calm yet purposeful activity. Outside the cabin, the village remained largely unaware of the precautions being taken within this modest dwelling, yet the groundwork for survival had been quietly established. A week later, the valley was gripped by a relentless freeze. Dawn brought a sharp clarity to the air, each breath forming a visible plume as villagers emerged to face the transformed landscape. The shallow creek had frozen solid, the thin ice cracking under cautious steps. Other homes bore the first signs of the harsh weather, wooden floors warped, creaking under the weight of frost, while ceilings gathered a delicate lace of ice along beams and rafters. Families huddled around failing fires, wrapping blankets tightly around shoulders and pressing close to the hearths, watching in quiet despair as frost crept across walls, threatening to crack plaster and shatter timbers. In contrast, Samuel Fletcher's cabin remained intact. The stone floor, laid with care over timber planks, absorbed and distributed the cold evenly, preventing the wood beneath from splitting under the sudden contraction. Samuel moved calmly among the rooms, stoking the fire and checking the hearth, ensuring his family remained warm and dry. He adjusted clay-filled gaps where frost threatened to seep, testing each surface with a steady hand. His younger sister, Mary, followed with smaller tasks, passing stones for minor repairs and fetching water from the partially frozen creek. The dog, Rust, lay curled near the hearth, alert to the creaks and groans of other homes, but untroubled within the fortified cabin. Neighbors began to gather, drawn by the failure of other homes and the stillness that emanated from Samuel's dwelling. John Carter approached cautiously, inspecting the smooth stone floor, his children peering from behind him. Even Henry Doyle, the constable who had once doubted the project, leaned on his walking stick and examined the craftsmanship silently, nodding in muted acknowledgement. Conversation was minimal, practical, grounded in observation rather than commentary, as each witness measured the tangible proof of the boy's foresight. Outside, the wind tore across the valley with renewed force, rattling shutters and bending bare tree limbs. But inside Samuel's cabin, the air remained steady and dry. Snow began to accumulate along the edges of the roof, forming small drifts against the walls, yet the structure stood firm. The villagers moved from cabin to cabin, assessing damage, while Samuel continued methodically, reinforcing the hearth and ensuring stability. His diligence, previously the subject of ridicule, now spoke in silence. Preparation and patience had withstood the first true test of the season. Take a moment to like, share, and subscribe while we observe the cabin before the winter strikes. As temperatures climbed slightly following the harshest days of the freeze, villagers ventured from their damaged homes to inspect the aftermath. The valley was quiet, except for the crunch of snow underfoot and the occasional crack of timber settling from frost. Everywhere, splintered floors and bowed walls revealed the toll exacted by the sudden cold, while hearths sagged or shattered entirely under the weight of ice and freezing moisture. Families moved cautiously through their own cabins, assessing the damage and whispering among themselves about repairs that would be required. Samuel Fletcher's home, in contrast, presented a strikingly different scene. The stone floor lay even and secure, the timber beneath intact, showing none of the faults that plagued neighboring homes. Mary assisted her brother in inspecting each section, confirming that gaps remained sealed and that the hearth and walls had suffered no perceptible damage. Observers noted the simplicity and effectiveness of the design. The even distribution of stone had absorbed the cold and prevented warping, a fact now visible to all. Neighbors approached, some hesitantly, to witness the results of what had been dismissed as a boy's folly. John Carter leaned on the fence, examining the floor, while his children peered curiously, noting the smooth, level surface. Even Henry Doyle, the skeptical constable, admitted the logic of Samuel's work, speaking quietly to others about the simple principles that had ensured survival. He highlighted the placement of stones beneath the timber and the careful attention to gaps, acknowledging that careful observation and methodical labor could achieve results that brute force or tradition could not. The community, previously doubtful, began to recognize Samuel's quiet foresight. Conversations shifted from derision to measured respect as neighbors assessed the durability of the cabin. The labor of weeks, repeated with patience and diligence, now spoke more clearly than any argument. Preparation and careful attention to detail had prevailed where assumption and routine had failed. Samuel continued tending the cabin, his movements calm and unhurried, allowing the evidence of his work to demonstrate its worth without fanfare. In the weeks following the freeze, the valley slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though the lessons of the harsh winter remained etched in every household. Neighbors who had once doubted Samuel Fletcher's unusual methods began to seek his advice, approaching the cabin to observe his careful handling of stones and the preparation techniques he employed. Children watched attentively as he moved slabs into precise positions, learning to measure, align, and press clay into gaps with deliberate patience. Each movement demonstrated the importance of forethought, the quiet accumulation of skill and respect for the forces of nature. Adults, too, began to reconsider their assumptions, observing Samuel's labor with a newfound attention to detail. Conversations among villagers shifted from criticism to questions about techniques, timing, and the interpretation of early signs of frost. John Carter examined the pattern of stone placement beneath the timber floor, taking notes for repairs in his own home, while Mrs. Whitman reflected on the value of measured observation over snap judgments. Even Henry Doyle, the constable, offered practical guidance drawn from Samuel's example, highlighting the logic behind labor that prioritized structure and patience above speed or tradition. Within the Fletcher household, Thomas Fletcher felt a quiet pride in his son's endurance and ingenuity. He watched Samuel inspect the floor for any shifting stones, seeing in each careful adjustment a demonstration of resilience and foresight. Mary continued assisting, gradually mastering the precision required for such work, her attention sharpened by weeks of observation. Rust, the family dog, remained a silent companion, moving alongside Samuel during inspection and resting beside him during moments of pause. The valley, while returning to its daily routines of tending livestock, chopping wood, and maintaining fires, carried a subtle change in perspective. Where once ideas were dismissed too readily, now observation, patience, and methodical effort were valued. The winter's freeze had left its mark not only on the structures of homes, but on the community itself, a lesson in foresight, discipline, and calm labor, demonstrating that careful preparation could preserve life and livelihood where doubt and haste had failed. The Fletcher's cabin stood as enduring proof, a quiet testament to the power of measured action in the face of relentless winter. Years had passed since the winter that tested every home in the valley, yet Samuel Fletcher's stone-sealed cabin endured as a quiet testament to careful preparation. Edward Harlow, a traveling surveyor documenting the early settlement patterns and environmental conditions, arrived one autumn to record the valley's history. He measured distances, noted timber quality, and cataloged structures, but it was the Fletcher home that drew his attention most keenly. Every floorboard, stone, and hearth reflected the lessons learned from that singular, harsh winter. Mary Fletcher, now a young woman, accompanied Harlow through the property. She recounted with precise memory the events of decades prior, describing the deliberate placement of stones, the clay-filled gaps, and the methodical diligence her brother had maintained. Her tone was measured, avoiding embellishment, presenting facts in sequence with a clarity that reflected years of observation and understanding. Edward noted her descriptions carefully, recording them alongside sketches of the cabin's structure and layout. The valley's other homes, many repaired or rebuilt over the years, were considered against the benchmark of the Fletcher cabin, revealing the enduring value of foresight and careful labor. Samuel himself had matured, yet the practices he learned and applied as a 16-year-old remained visible in the precise alignment of stones, the integrity of timber beneath, and the stability of the hearth. Neighbors occasionally visited, checking on repairs or seeking advice, acknowledging through quiet gestures the legacy of his careful preparation. The dog, Rust, long since aged and retired, lay by the hearth, a living link to the events Mary recounted. Even in the absence of those who had once doubted him, the cabin's resilience continued to speak for itself, demonstrating the enduring consequence of observation, discipline, and deliberate labor. Edward Harlow recorded not only the physical structure, but the human story entwined with it. A young boy's resolve, a community's eventual recognition, and the practical proof that preparation and foresight could withstand the harshest natural forces. The cabin remained, standing against wind, snow, and the passage of time, a symbol of resilience and careful practice. It was a record, not of legend, but of methodical action, illustrating that measured preparation and calm perseverance could yield results far beyond expectation, lessons preserved for generations that followed in the valley. As the valley learns from Samuel's foresight, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to honor careful preparation and quiet diligence.